Madam Deputy Clerk, the time is 7 p.m. I call this meeting to order. The town of Aurora acknowledges that the Anishinaabe lands on which we live and work are the traditional and treaty territory of the Chippewas of Regina Island, as well as many other nations whose presence here continues to this day. As the closest First Nation community to Aurora, we recognize the special relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and as a municipality, we join them in these responsibilities. We further acknowledge that Aurora is part of the treaty lands of the Mississaugas and Chippewas, recognized through Treaty Number 13, as well as the Williams Treaties of 1923. Shared understanding of the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries and how our collective past has brought us to where we are today will help us walk together into a better future. Council, can I get a motion to approve the agenda with the added items? Councilor Kemp, Councilor Weiss, any comments or questions? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Move to community presentations. We have one, Mr. Christopher Watts, the Aurora Heritage Authority regarding Aurora's Angels Memorial Day. Mr. Watts, welcome. 5 minutes and the floor is yours.
The clock gets started. I just want to thank the clerk's office for rearranging and putting this under a community presentation. It was on as a delegation earlier, and they just helped to expedite that. Secondly, as this item speaks to Aurora's heroes, and it would be a shame to run out of time as I go through listing names, I just ask for consideration, perhaps from the chair. Maybe procedural bylaw can be waived for extended time to allow for this. There's 30 slides. There's 14 individuals that we're going to discuss this evening.
Council. Councilor Thompson, second. Sir Kim, waive to 10 minutes. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Floor is yours.
Thanks. I'll try and get through this as fast as possible. Angels Memorial that has been proclaimed for this Saturday, November 9th. It's a culmination of over 18 months' work reconnecting with Aurora's heroic past. Aurora has already observed and had a proclamation for the centennial of the RCAF back in April. And it was important to do so because for a town of its size, Aurora boasts proportionally a high number of its citizens to enter the service for the RCAF. Some more notable figures for this are former Prime Minister Lester B. Pearson, whose actual nickname Mike was given to him by his flying instructor back in 1917. And secondly, Dick Illingworth, former mayor of Aurora, needs no introduction, continued on after serving as a navigator in Ferry Command in the RCAF in World War II to actually be an auxiliary officer with the rank of wing commander. So these are two individuals that were lucky enough to come home, but not all were. And we're here tonight to recognize 14 members of the RCAF that served during World War II who were killed in action. So on the altar of sacrifice, the names of Aurora's fallen from World War II are inscribed in an alphabetical order without any indication of branch of the service that they served under. And I've highlighted here those that are served with the RCAF. And the importance of doing so is because there's a saying that says you die twice, once when you stop breathing, and the second when somebody mentions your name for the last time. And tonight, we're going to be sure to say these names and go even a little further and put some faces to the names and learn a little bit more about who these heroes were. It's an honor to present to you tonight Aurora's Angels. To those that were closest to them, they're really known as friends, classmates, co-workers, brothers, fathers, sons, and grandsons. And when we go through these, and I want you to look at these faces and keep in mind the average lifespan of an Aurora Angel was 25. So why Angels? Angels is an homage to the nickname given to Aurora native Lloyd Chadbourne by the 8th and 9th USAF bomber crews, which his squadrons protected. Chadbourne was a student at Aurora Public School, made and flew model planes around town before he was able to join up with the RCAF. His mother owned and operated the chateau, which still stands on Yonge Street. And there's such a wealth of material that it's surprising Chadburn's story has not been made yet into a movie. I can't expand into this too much, but I wanted to just mark a couple of accomplishments. The first Aurora to obtain rank of pilot officer and proceed overseas during World War II. The first graduate of the Commonwealth Air Training Plan to be given command of a squadron. The youngest squadron leader in the RCAF at 21. First to destroy an E-boat with cannon fire. First RCAF officer to be decorated with the Distinguished Service Order twice, and one of only 4 in history, and the only RCA officer to receive the highest French honor, the Croix d'Hier. Jean Leslie Bradbury attended a Republican high school. He also served as a corporal in the Queen's York Rangers, worked as a heel builder at Sisman Shoe Company, and before serving the RCF, Bradbury was a constable at the Toronto Police Force. Bradbury is posted to 20 Operational Training Unit out of Lossiemouth in Scotland, where he piloted Vickers Wellington bombers. John Harrison Cowison is also a Republican high school student, but worked at Fleury Foundry and was a private in the Queen's York Rangers. Cowison was posted to RAF 226 Squadron, where he served as a wireless operator and gunner on B-25 Mitchell bombers. George Elvin Davis is another Aurora High School student, receiving his wings in October of 1941, was posted to 52 Operational Training Unit, where he's trained to fly Spitfires. The Spitfire featured here was one that Davis was piloting on his fateful flight and actually flew with 19th Squadron RAF during the Battle of Britain. Donald Banbury Douglas is the only grandson of Jesse and Jane Banbury, owners of the operators of the Banbury livery in Aurora. Douglas was posted to 235 RAF Squadron, operating out of RAF Banff in Scotland, and has the distinction of being the only angel to fly the Canadian-made de Havilland Mosquito. It's a versatile fighter-bomber aircraft made completely of wood. Eric Walter Folliot attended Aurora High School and was classmates with fellow angel Robert Rumble. He was posted to RCAF 424 Squadron, where he served as navigator on Halifax bombers. Burton Dix Howard lived on Temperance Street, also worked at Collis Leather. Howard was posted to 630 RAF Squadron, where he served as rear gunner on Lancaster bombers and air operations over Germany. Harry Leslie Kay is an Aurora High School student, and the photo pictured here shows him with classmates with fellow angel John Leslie Bradbury, formerly mentioned. Kay was a pitcher of the 1933 Aurora Blue Ribbon baseball team, also a graduate of U of T. Commissioned a pilot officer in September of 1939, Kay spent hours as flight instructor and was the commanding officer at Windsor and Oshawa bases before being posted to 428 RSCF Squadron, where aboard Lancaster bombers, his crew carried out air operations over Stuttgart. William David King is one of 3 brothers that I've come to refer as the 3 Kings, Bill, Perry, and Dale, all 3 serving with the RCAF. Bill attended high school as well as St. Andrews College and started his service as a commando, actually attached to 8th Canadian Reconnaissance Regiment. But on leave, he met up with school chum, Lloyd Chadburn, featured in the photo up there, and transferred to the Tactical Air Force, receiving flying instruction in Torquay before returning to Canada for further instruction at Camp Borden. Bill's brother Perry also attended school here in Aurora, was employed at the Bank of Montreal. After earning his wings in Brantford in December of 1941, Perry started piloting Wellington bombers in Ireland, doing coastal command flights. He was reposted to the Royal Australian Air Force 458 Squadron in Malta and was sadly killed on his 21st birthday while serving as a second pilot when his Wellington was shot down over the Italian coast. William Donald Pegan was an Aurora High School student, receiving his wings in Moncton and posting to 412 RCAF Squadron to fly Hurricanes and Spitfires. Pegan failed to return from an operational flight to destroy rail lines in France, November 25th of 1942. Robert Mons Rumble was an Aurora High School student, where he was the captain of the basketball team. Posted to RAF 619 Squadron, he piloted Lancaster bombers on raids over Germany. Robert Jack Turp is also a public and Aurora High School student, but an outstanding vocalist, well known to York Music Festival audiences. Received his commission as pilot officer in August of 1941 and was posted to 416 Squadron and flew under Lloyd Chadburn's command. Reginald Herbert Wade, also, again, not unexpectedly an Aurora Public and High School student, but lived here on Metcalf Street. His house still stands, worked at Collis Leather. Wade received his wings at Mountain View in February of 1943, was posted to 408 RCF Squadron, where he served as a wireless operator and gunner on Lancaster bombers, engaged in operations against aircraft factories in Germany. So Aurora's Angels are honored in an art installation currently on display at the Royal Rose Gallery here in town. It's comprised of an authentic officer's summer's dress uniform, complete with a Mae West vest, radio headset, great coat, and the mannequin form is backed with a set of angel's wings, adorned with 14 rows of handcrafted poppies, each with a military button at its center. Perched above its halo is a halo, and at its feet, a footlocker is hand-painted with the names and service numbers of all 14 angels. To the right is a 1/7 scale Spitfire model painted in the livery of Wing Commander Lloyd Chadbourn's 1943 whip. You'll notice as you make your way along Yonge Street on the east side, all the way from Wellington Street down to the public library, there's a series of banners featuring all 14 angels. This series was coordinated with the Aurora Legion and made possible by funding from the Town of Aurora Community Partnership Grant. The names of Aurora's Angels can be found on street names throughout the town, and over the past year, we've worked with the town to shore up some deficiencies in the street naming policy, ensuring names that were not currently assigned to streets are in the street naming bank, that worn poppy stickers were noted and replaced, missing poppies applied, and in the case of Folliot Street that was misspelt, corrections are underway to properly honor these heroes. We've also partnered with No Stone Left Alone, an initiative that engaged students with grave sites. Back in 2022, No Stone Left Alone honored Angel William Donald Pagan's grave in France, and a video of this is available online. We're preparing kits to engage local schools for similar efforts here at home in the years ahead. To make this possible, we visited grave markers for 6 angels and 3 cemeteries and cleaned their markers. We've also hoped to raise more awareness of a long-running initiative, which is the Christmas cards to active service members, spearheaded and organized by the Harrisons. Cards can be received at the display at Royal Rose Gallery, even slid through the mail slot after hours. I've included here a photo of a Christmas card from Aurora Angel Burton Howard to his sister from his last Christmas while on active service. Gone is the Angel is the name of Lloyd Chadbourn's biography. And I was kind of disappointed that I couldn't find a copy anywhere amongst the Aurora Public Library or museum collections for the public to access. But during this project, I've been in constant communications with the author Rob Forbes. I'm pleased to report that due to sharing research and asking endless questions, he's begun and has now completed a complete rewrite of his book. I'm understanding that it's with his publisher and artwork has been commissioned for the cover and is expected to be available next year. And finally, working with Mr. Forbes and Chadbourn's living relative, we're assembling nomination papers for Chadbourn to be considered for Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame. So I'm hoping that this quick and brief presentation provides you with a fresh perspective for reflection during this remembrance period, and would invite anyone who wants to learn more to join us at the Royal Rose Gallery on the 14th hour, which is 2 p.m. on the day, to visit the installation and celebrate Aurora's Angels. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, is there any questions? Presentation, Councilor Reese.
Yes, I just want to thank you, Christopher. It's a great presentation. It's historical. It's important. It's timely, of course, because of the time of year. And I know this is a passion of yours. Can you tell me how long the Royal Rose Gallery is going to be open for this type of thing?
Mr. Watts?
Through you. Sorry.
And we'll come down just after Remembrance Day on the 12th. So there's plenty of time.
Councilor?
Okay, thank you. I recall the 100th year anniversary that we celebrated here, and at the time the idea was that we were supposed to light the town with some blue light of some kind. Have you talked to the ATS people about using the lights at ATS for this? I assume it's the same color, blue, through you, Mayor.
Mr. Watts?
Yeah, I put 2 requests in. I put a request in for flag raising, which unfortunately couldn't be fulfilled. Secondly, I did inquire about using the light or new illumination piece at Town Hall for doing this. And I understand that there was only 2 colors. Blue was not possible. which was also unfortunate. I didn't understand why that limitation was in place. I just assumed that any color of the rainbow could be used, but I did make a request for that, and unfortunately that could not have been made. Thanks.
Council.
Okay, no, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Gardner.
Thank you so much for all the work you've done, the many hours I'm sure you've spent on this. As Councillor Weiss says, it's important. I have a question about the proclamation, which is gone. It says the week of, and then it says it notes Saturday as the day. I'm assuming that it's just the Saturday, not the week.
Swats.
The day, I don't know why when the proclamation was written, it has the wording for week of. Maybe it was a boilerplate from some other proclamation piece, but it is just for this Saturday, the 9th.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Thompson.
Thank you. Similar to Councilor Gardner, I just wanted to clarify the proclamation, but also mostly to just thank you for doing the research and to put the time in to educate us all about it. It's great. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none. Mr. Watts, thank you very much for coming out this evening. Sure. I need a motion to receive. Councilor Thompson, Councilor Gallo, all those in favor? Opposed, that carries. Delegations, 6.1. Sandra, Hallig, and Cheyenne for Shared Tower Inc. regarding item 14.3. Welcome. 5 minutes and the floor is yours.
Council, town staff, and all those joining us this evening. My name is Sandra Hallig. I am a planning coordinator with Shared Tower Inc. And I am joined by our senior planning manager, Cheyenne Zierler. The purpose of our delegation this evening is about the proposed telecom tower at 15400 Bayview Avenue. And we would like to provide some insight to council about public comments received, how they were addressed, and present council with an alternative option for tower design and height to further minimize the visual impact. As a carrier-neutral telecommunications real estate and infrastructure company, the aim of all of our proposals is to contribute to the overall goal of the wireless network, which is to allow for the greatest number of people to be connected with the highest quality of service. In order for carriers to keep up with the demands and the needs of their users, each one must establish their own wireless network. And this brings me to our proposal. Shared Tower is proposing a 40-meter flush-mounted design tower, flush-mounted monopole-style tower at 15400 Bayview Avenue. This tower will be built and will allow for multi-carrier co-location opportunities. In terms of our application, it has followed all the requirements set out in the Town of Aurora's protocol. I just have some statistics here for public consultation. We sent out 384 notification packages to properties within the prescribed notification radius. We had approximately 8 residents reach out with comments, questions, and concerns, and approximately 15 residents who showed up to our public information session hosted on May 15th. One of the questions that we received was that the tower is being placed in the densest part of Aurora, and that why this tower is needed when existing infrastructure is already in place. It's important to note that we are no longer at a time where this type of infrastructure can just be in the outskirts of our towns. Capacity limits is something that has a direct link to our wireless network. As the population grows, technology becomes enhanced, municipalities expands, infrastructure that once was able to service an area is no longer able to and becomes overburdened. Multiple people are trying to access the network all at the same time, which can have a direct impact into the quality of connection that infrastructure is able to provide. In order to show that there is a need for improved coverage, we asked a third-party engineering consultant to complete a propagation study for us. These maps reflect a specific frequency and show the difference in what currently exists in coverage versus what would be improved with the proposed tower. As we can see, the existing coverage allows for minimal voice call capabilities and low throughput data streaming uses. With the proposed tower, the area can now have great coverage, allowing for quality voice calls, high throughput data streaming, and reliable and consistent access to the wireless network. We were also asked about our site selection process, some alternative locations that we explored, and also to explore different options brought forth by the town staff, residents, and the ward councillor. Here I have a map on the screen that shows areas highlighted in yellow of areas that we have investigated. Areas highlighted in green are where the existing telecom towers are currently located. And we also have some factors on the screen that we take into consideration during our site selection process. And that includes expected usage patterns of service and proximity to users, line of sight requirements to ensure high quality communications, availability of a willing landowner, just to name a few examples. In regard to concerns about health and safety, we follow the limits set out by Health Canada through Safety Code 6. We were also asked by residents to complete a Safety Code 6 report. And so we did ask a third-party engineering consultant to complete one for us. Our results show that radio frequency levels would not exceed 10.8% or 6% of the Safety Code 6 limits. It's important to state that these Safety Code 6 limits already have a 50-fold safety margin incorporated within them, below the threshold of potential adverse health effects. So that is 10.8% and 6% of that Safety Code 6 limit. In regard to tower design and visual impact, we wanted to make sure we were selecting a design that was consistent with what is typically installed in urban areas similar to the subject site, but is also consistent with what is already installed within the town of Aurora. And I have just some examples here on the screen. The flush-mounted design was also chosen to minimize visual impact, particularly with antenna design and carrier equipment. We understand that a huge chunk of the community input that we received was regarding visual impact and impact on surrounding land uses. But also, given our extensive site selection process, as staff has mentioned in their report, this is the ideal site to support the poor coverage issue that has been identified in the area. So our job as Share Tower, we are dedicated to balancing the community needs with the input of, balancing the community input with the needs of the wireless users in the area and also the needs of the wireless network.
Sandra, if I can just get you to wrap up soon.
Yes, yeah,
Thank you.
I'm on my last slide. So Share Tower is willing to discuss the possibility of doing a 35-meter shrouded monopole that is similar to the tower design here on the screen. This tower height and design is consistent with the structures that are already in place in the town of Aurora, specifically the ones off Earl Stewart Drive and one off St. John's Side Road East. A lower height and shrouding does mean that co-location opportunities will be limited, but it is in alignment with the town of Aurora's protocol for radio communications, specifically section 3.2. So in conclusion, Share Tower is seeking a letter of concurrence from council, but we also would like council to consider the alternative option of Share Tower pursuing a 35-meter shrouded monopole instead of a 40-meter flush-mounted monopole. Thank you again, Mr. Mayor and members of council, for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. Myself and Cheyenne are happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Council, can I get a motion to receive and refer to item 14.3? Councilor Gallo, Councilor Kim, any questions? Councilor Thompson?
Thank you. Can I just ask to put up the slide that had to deal with the network coverage? Then I just have some questions specific to that when you get a chance. One back. Perfect, right there. Oh. Go forward one. Thank you. So it's my understanding that part of the rationale behind here is to address the poor coverage, and you've shown on this particular slide that there are areas in red that are receiving very poor coverage. According to the definition, these are minimal voice call capabilities. And I guess I want to understand that, because if I were to overlay the streets onto this map, these are well-populated areas. This is between Maverick and Conover. There are lots of homes there. In all honesty, I live in this area. Personally, I get 5G coverage. I know people within this area. I've not had any feedback indicating that they have, as you describe it, minimal voice call capabilities. So I guess I want to understand, first off, who did the study and the facts behind it to justify that, because from my limited knowledge, I don't see the poor coverage that you're describing here. So I guess first off, this independent study, third-party company, who hires them? Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Sandra?
That we have asked is a third-party engineering consultant that specializes in radio frequencies. So they do perform propagation studies, and they also perform safety code 6 studies. They are called YRH Montreal. And from my understanding, we have been working with them, and they also work with multiple carriers as well too.
Counselor?
So you have a good vendor relationship with them and have used them in the past?
Sandra?
Thank you. So I guess help me to understand then, the fact that from my, I guess, experience, I don't see as you've described it, minimal voice call capabilities. I haven't heard any feedback in many, many years from living in this area. So why is it, I guess, described as very poor? What would be the, I guess, data or information that would lead someone to that conclusion?
Sandra?
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
So in regard to this information on the screen, one of the things that they utilize when retrieving this information is based on hard data factors. So things like subscriber feedback, maybe factors such as dropped calls, text messages not being sent, things like that. We do understand that for some instances, people will say, my coverage is fine, my coverage works great, I don't have an issue here, and I haven't heard anything from anyone else. However, there isn't only one major carrier that is in the market that is within the area. I believe early on in the application process, we did do a search, and we found a community forum that was available in regard to different residents from the town of Aurora. And different residents did voice out that in this particular area, in the plaza and areas around it, they usually have to go the extra length to make sure that they get access to data and they get access to having a consistent call. So going the extra length as in having to step out of their own homes to make sure that their call will stay through and be consistent, or turn on functions on their phone such as Wi-Fi calling, which is helpful in certain instances. However, it's very clear that users do pay for this service. And if they don't get reliable and consistent access to it, then that's when carriers would like to provide a solution.
Council?
Thank you. Is through you, Mr. Mayor, again, is any of this data available to members of the public or council just to validate the findings that are here so that we can independently also just feel comfortable that the information being presented is true and accurate?
Sandra?
I don't believe this information is made available to the public. I know for ourselves, we work closely with the carriers. However, we are the infrastructure owner, so we don't have access to their hard data factors or subscriber feedback.
Thank you.
Counselor?
One last question. I know you talked about exploring different locations and different options. Did you look at small cell technology? I mean, some places are doing things and utilizing the utility poles and light fixtures and so forth to try and address gaps in coverage.
Sandra?
So for those options, for this specific proposal, we did need the height in order to have the carriers place equipment that would address the poor coverage issue in this area. We were asked by the town staff to explore rooftop options as well too. However, there were no rooftops that were able to provide that sort of provide co-location opportunities for us, and also were at an adequate height.
Thank you.
Council?
Thank you.
Yeah. Councilor Kemp?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Sandra and Cheyenne, for presenting. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the presenters. So looking at the before and after shot, it seems the improvement is really within about 300 meters. Is that correct? Like one cell phone tower really only improves to a 300-meter diameter or thereabouts?
Sandra?
There are a lot of factors in play. These coverage maps do provide a good idea of how much coverage is able to be improved, but that's where it's really important to understand how the wireless network does work. So with the existing infrastructure that is in place, that existing infrastructure works together to be able to service all the communities in between. So the proposed tower is able to provide improved coverage here, but it is also helping to offload the network traffic that other cell towers are experiencing in the areas that they're servicing and provide that network support.
Councilor.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, so is this proposal based on if we build, they will come, they meaning the telecom companies, or I'm assuming that you guys have already spoken with the Rogers and Telus and they do have interest in locating their equipment here?
Sandra.
To date, we do have one confirmed major carrier that has confirmed interest to co-locate on the tower. But as a carrier neutral telecommunications infrastructure company, we are currently in discussion with other carriers as well too. Usually they have their budgets planned years in advance. So we're working with them in terms of their future plans to co-locate on the tower.
Councilor.
Thank you. I mean, my personal experience is that, I've lived here for a while and in that area, and when I run or walk, and I ran and walked all those streets, and I didn't have any problems with drop calls, but I do agree that when it comes to when I'm listening to live news on the digital feed, there are gaps along Bayview and on the western part of Wellington. So I do acknowledge that. Whether others need that level of intense data when they're running, like me, I don't know, but I do acknowledge that, but I haven't experienced any drop calls in that area. I do have another question for staff later on, which is about communication to residents, because certainly I think we'd like to get buy-in from residents as well and their perspective before I approve, but I'll ask that question later. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Gallo.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out. Thank you for the presentation. I'll have some more comments once the report comes up and some questions to staff as well. But as you know, we met several times, and I had also made some suggestions as to alternative locations. And I see you've explored them, and in the report it identifies that you could not find an alternative location, and it appears that one of the largest reasons was an unwilling landlords. Between now and council, I will explore further, but I did reach out to one of the landlords, and they hadn't had any communication from your side. So I'm going to confirm that between now and council. I don't know, obviously I didn't contact all of them. There are some areas that are in, parts of Aurora that the town owns, but may be deemed as environmentally sensitive. And I think we should be exploring those, notwithstanding their location. So I guess my question is, did you actually reach out to all of those landlords indicated on the map? To you, Mr. Mayor.
Sandra.
So in terms of our site selection process, there's a lot of factors that do go into play, as mentioned. If we can go back to slide number 7.
I'm just interested in knowing whether or not you reached out to all of the landlords. That was all my question.
So we have reached out to all of the landlords, but there are also other factors in place, such as elevation, the environmentally protected lands.
My only question was whether or not you reached out to all of the landlords. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Oh,
I just couldn't figure out how to raise the hand. Is it raised now?
I Sorry, Councillor Gillen, I didn't see it. The screen's still showing the map and the thing, so I didn't see yours, but I'll give you an opportunity if you want to ask a question, or if it's something for staff, if you want to wait, because I'm assuming the report's going to get pulled.
It was just a quick question for the delegate.
Sure, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the delegate, could you confirm if this is a 5G tower or 4G?
Sandra?
We are currently in discussions with the carrier in terms of the type of equipment that they would like to place on. But I believe that it would most likely be 4G, 5G.
Councillor?
Okay, so it's either or, so it's 4G or 5G. Okay, perfect. And just a final question, you had some data there about a public forum that you had. Do you have any of the results of that can be shared with the public as far as, or with council rather, as their concerns? I know you highlighted a little bit in your presentation, but we haven't seen the rest of them, and it would just be really interesting to know that those data points.
Sandra?
Provided town staff, in addition to our final deliverable and our final application, we did provide town staff with a public comments summary and all of the correspondence via email in regard to the proposed tower. So I think it would be, that could be provided after the council meeting.
Okay, perfect.
Councillor?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We have one delegation that's been rescheduled, and the next one, 6.3, Wendy James, resident, regarding yellow dividing line on Timpson Avenue. Ms. James, welcome. You have 5 minutes and the floor is yours.
First, I'd like to start off by acknowledging Linda for her patience with me and explaining how this whole process worked.
And Wendy, if I can just get you to shift over slightly to be closer to the mic, so that way we can all make sure we can all hear. Thank you.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. I also want council to know that the reason that I am dealing with this issue is quite simply for safety. And that has been my whole purpose over 4 years ago. And I'm still dealing with it. So I'm hoping that the council can help me resolve this issue. 4 years ago, there were no parking signs on Timpson. And it took me roughly 2 years to convince the town to put up no parking signs. Unfortunately, they didn't change the dividing line, the yellow dividing line. And the reality is, if you don't change that line, you might as well not have no parking signs, because it basically negates the advantage of having no parking. So Timpson was under construction this summer. So I phoned the town, explained the situation since the no parking signs had been put up. And I was guaranteed, because this was the perfect time, right? No yellow line down. And the person guaranteed me that it would be put down properly once the construction had finished. Well, it wasn't. It's right back down the middle again. And to be honest with you, I'm at a loss as to what else I can do to get this situation rectified. And I have had numerous phone conversations recently, people not calling me back. And like, it's just so frustrating. And I've got a whole list of who I called, when I called, the time I called. But to me, that's not the issue right now. The issue is to get Timpson done properly. And I am sure that there is no other street in Aurora that has no parking on one side that does not have that yellow dividing line off center. It's just common sense. And that's it.
Okay. Thank you. Council, can I get a motion to receive delegation? Councillor Gartner, second. Councillor Thompson, any questions for the delegate? Councillor Gartner, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't have a question, but I'm very sorry for your frustration and all the work that you've had to put into this. So could this be referred to staff at this point, or would it be under new business?
Maybe we can do something under new business, Council.
We'll see if we can take care of this under new business. Thank you. I didn't hear what you were saying, but I think you wanted to know if you were going to be notified what's going to be happening. Can you put her mic?
Yep.
on?
Go ahead, Ms. James.
I couldn't hear your question. Could you say it again?
And what if it doesn't get done? What if they don't change the yellow line? Do you want me to come back here?
No.
Oh. So what would you suggest?
The directors have heard your comment and we'll put it in their hands. We'll work on it in new business. We've heard what you've had to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Gedline?
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you very much for coming and explaining your situation. I had no idea that this had occurred. I wish that we were able to at least get a handle on this before the yellow line went down. Certainly we'll have a discussion about this, it sounds like, in new business, and hopefully we can come to some sort of resolution and get some questions answered. But sorry you had to go through all this for the last few years, and I know safety is number one for you. And I appreciate your engagement and your passion about this. So we will have a conversation at that point. So thanks so much.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Ms. James, thank you very much for coming out this evening. We'll hopefully enter new business, figure out where we're going with this. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Advisory Committee meeting minutes. Someone like to move those? Councillor Kim, seconder. Councillor Weiss, any comments or questions on the Advisory Committee meeting minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We have no consent agenda. Are there any items anyone wants pulled? I will just say we need 11.1 and we need 14.3 pulled. So if someone wants to pull those two, but other than that, does anyone want any items pulled? Councillor Kemp?
Do 11.3.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Gillen?
I guess 11.1, because somebody has to pull it other than the chair.
Thank you. Yeah,
And-
I can't pull it, so thank you.
Yeah. And then it was 14.3.
3.
Okay, and 14.3.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Oh, never mind.
Councillor Gardner?
Yes, 14.1
Okay,
and 9.1. And I've
Thank you.
got 14.2 written down, and I have no idea what it is.
you want to pull 14.2?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Anyone else? Councillor Weiss? Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Gilland, is your hand still up or is you up again?
Up again. I just wanted to know if someone pulled 14.3.
It was pulled. Yeah, you pulled it.
Oh, that's the one you told me to pull. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, can I get a motion to approve the remaining items minus 9.1, 11.1, 11.2, 11.3, 11.4, 14.1, 14.2, and 14.3. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Gallo. Thank you, Linda. Just making sure it's up there. Okay, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Yeah, I can do that. I'll move 14.3 because we have residents in the audience for that. So we'll start with 14.3. This is the application for the radio communication tower. Councillor Gilliland, you pulled this one. Did you want to move the recommendation?
I would just put down for receive for now.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Gallo, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Gilliland.
I did have some questions about this application, and I understand that Councillor Gallo had spoken to the delegate about possible other locations. I guess through you to Mr. Rumuno, could you shed some light on some of the other locations that are possible here, and perhaps maybe there's more areas that we should be exploring?
Mr. Rumuno.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, apart from the map that is in the report or in the applicant's presentation, the dozen or so locations that they had investigated, I'm not aware of any other sites that they're looking at, but they may be looking at others. And if they do, again, they will have to, follow our protocol and schedule a public information session if they do find another tower that they want to investigate and bring forward.
Councillor.
Thank you. And I guess another question I have for you, through Mr. Mayor to Mr. Rumuno, the delegate had also said that the public doesn't have access to any of the data that was conducted in the third-party consultation that Councillor Thompson referred to from YH or YR Montreal. And I'm just curious as to why that is and why we wouldn't have access to that type of information, especially if we're really trying to make an informed decision on whether or not we require this extra data communication tower there. Do you could you offer any advice on that as to why we can't get that information?
Mr. Rumuno.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, it's my understanding that I think the third party, it's very technical information. We don't have anybody on staff to analyze it. And my understanding is the third party doesn't really release that information. If they did, we would have to engage a appropriate consultant to analyze that information.
Councillor.
Thank you. I guess my only comment is I listened to a lot of my colleagues around the table about the lagging of service or whether or not there was any. Myself, I could say the same thing. I purposely am probably one of those weird people that I set my phone on 3G. I don't put it on 4G or 5G. I purposely set it on low settings, and I don't experience these lags that they're talking about either. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well. I'm interested in hearing what Councillor Gallo has to say on this, because obviously there are some other locations that could be alternatives, and I certainly don't want to leave any stones unturned on this. So I'm going to wait to hear what Councillor Gallo has to say on this.
Thank you. Councillor Gallo. Just give it a sec, Councillor. This thing froze over here, so we have to change it from. Go ahead.
Hi.
Councillor Gallo. We don't take comments from the public at this moment in time. Thank you, though. Councillor Gallo, go ahead.
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Rumuno, some of the questions were already kind of asked in terms of locations and the reporting that the applicant has put forward. Is it to what extent has staff investigated any of the sites that were proposed by the applicant?
Mr. Rumuno.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, apart from, as per our protocol, we do encourage applicants who do come in to propose towers that they ensure that, number one, that they are communicating with other providers, and that there is an ability to, co-locate on existing towers. And one of the requirement is to undertake a site selection process. So we do rely on the applicant and their consultants to present that information. And as per our protocol, that information, was shared this evening with respect to those dozen sites. Staff ourselves don't necessarily get involved in that site selection process, aside from ensuring that any provider that comes in determines first if there's an ability to co-locate on an existing tower before they bring forward a new location.
Counselor?
Thank you. So we haven't analyzed to any degree any of the site selections other than filtering it through our protocol and making sure it follows our guidelines. In addition to that, the data that they've provided, we don't engage in a consultant to verify that data. You've heard already that, people on the ground experience something very different than what the mapping suggests. And, if we need one of these things every, 300 meters, 600 meters, these things would be dotted all over the place, and they're not. And I suspect they're not going to be. Specifically to this tower, and while, it may not be significant to many people, other than those directly affected, we originally spent, this town, $150,000 to put in the then Civic Square Park. We spent another $250,000 to redo the now Queen's Diamond Jubilee Park. And in those designs, as you all know, we implemented a playground, an accessible playground. But we also, what we did and spent a lot of money on, peace gardens. We spent a lot of money on fountains, a pathway, an area where people could go and meander and enjoy the peacefulness of that park. Now we're proposing within meters, a 30-meter giant beside it. It's just not the right location. It may be convenient for them because the expense of probably having another landlord locate it on their property, and there are many locations where they can choose. I suspect it's too expensive to be able to do that. At the expense of that neighborhood isn't fair. We need to take a second look at this. I'm not suggesting it's not necessarily needed. Between now and council, I will verify with some of those landowners whether or not they were actually contacted and report back to this council. I can assure you that while there's some members of the audience here that represent the community, there are far more that couldn't make it tonight to express their opinions and their disapproval of this location.
Thank you. Councilor Thompson?
Thank you. I appreciate Councillor Gallo's comments and agree with them as well. Just through you to Mr. Ramuno, with regards to the process and the protocols, you've stated that we don't really have the technical expertise, nor was the information provided other than the reports that they give us to validate the fact that there are no other opportunities to collate elsewhere, or that the need is justified based on the coverage. Is that correct?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
And really, our involvement, if you look through our protocol, which was developed roughly 10 years ago, is really just around the site selection. And so when I go back to it and take a look at it, there were a couple of points that stood out for me, and I just want to know whether we had input as we worked with this group. One of them was that it said that we should maximize the distance from public and institutional facilities such as schools, hospitals, community centers, daycare facilities, and senior residences. So do we feel, in our opinion, that this maximizes the distance from the senior center, senior residence, the high school that's coming in, and complies with the site selection protocol and criteria that we put together? Through you, Mr. Ramuno.
You, Mr. Mayor. I mean, that's, again, it's a difficult one because, as we've heard Councillor Gallo mention, this is one of our, in a very highly dense urban area, and there are limited opportunities. And so with respect to the protocol, we just ensure that the public process is followed, but we do rely on the Industry Canada and the applicant to conduct those reviews with respect to the need and meeting the Safety 6 guidelines.
Counselor?
Thank you. And, maybe it's time to revisit the protocol. I know we've had conversations this in the past. I mean, the 120-meter radius in which notification is mailed out. Thank you for providing me with the circulation map earlier today. But again, I think that there are many more owners within the area, some of which have been outside the circulation area that saw the notice board on Bayview and have spoken to me about it as well. But I think that, had we widened the circle, you'd see much more people here tonight, as well as many more comments at the public information, as well as engaged in this process that have concerns and questions and feel that more work needs to be done and or a different location should be proposed. Thank you.
You. Any other comments, questions? Councilor Gallo, second time.
Thank you. I failed to mention my first time around that I didn't necessarily take this lightly and take the opinion of, not in my backyard kind of approach. I met, as I mentioned, twice with the applicants. I did on my own time, site search for different locations that I suggested to them may be more appropriate, farther away from homes. I realize that probably a contradiction of terms when you're trying to provide a service to people in their homes. You shouldn't be too far away from them. But I tried to find areas not so far from this area and make those suggestions. And they listened, they looked at them, and clearly, as you can see on the map, they didn't select any of those sites. But my point is that the approach wasn't simply, no, don't do it, get it out of here. I tried my best to find other locations, and I haven't given up yet.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Do we want to just leave this as received for today and then we'll deal with it, Council? Otherwise, I need direction. All right, we'll leave it as received.
Received.
All the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We'll go to 9.1. I-5 registered municipality. Councilor Gardner, you pulled this one. Do you want to move the recommendation? Thank you. Seconder. Councilor Reese, thank you. Go ahead, Councilor Gardner.
It's a very interesting program, and it sounds like it would be worthwhile for the town to take part in this. When I'm looking at the financial implications, it sounds like the town has already, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. McDougall.
Ms. McDougall?
It sounds like the town has already taken advantage of this, that there was money put in the 2024 budget. I don't remember that.
Ms. McDougall?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, with regards to the 25 operating budget, it's a value that we feel we can cover. We do have to provide staff training as our requirement and entering into summer camp. This would just become one of those trainings that we will provide our summer programming and camp staff. So it is within and covered within our existing operating budget. It's not an add-on, just so you know.
Councilor?
And there was money, so there was money, it says there was money budgeted in 2024. There was just some general funds that were part of the operating budget.
Ms. McDougall?
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly we have some entry and training, as I say, required in for all of our staff. Utilizing those funds right now is to train the trainer and training our leader that will be responsible for delivering the training. So that's what's being used in 24 on the existing staff member.
Councilor?
So this is the first time I'm hearing about it. Does council know about this before the 2024 budget?
Ms. McDougall?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, not specifically, but with regards to High Five, it is a very well-known program and initiative in the community. And it is an example of a training initiative that we can provide our staff to enhance their skill level. What we're proposing here for council is to take it that much further. Ask that we actually train all of our camp staff, not just our program leaders. So that this is an expansion, and looking to council to approve the registration of our municipality in this program to take advantage of those extended services within this registration.
Counselor?
And I understand and don't disagree with any of that. What I am questioning is the line that says a total of 9,000 is budgeted in 2024, 2025. So this is not something that I know. This money is budgeted because it's part of general funds.
Ms. Worth? It's on.
Is it on? Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gartner. So we have a pool of funds in our operating budget for training year round. We're training about 300 part-time staff every year. So this money is just part of that pool. And the money that's been allocated for 2024 has been earmarked for this high five training from 2024. And so we're using our training dollars for part-time staff different ways every year to make the most of it and to take advantage of new opportunities that might come our way, like this one.
Counselor?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. That provides clarity. I appreciate it. Ms. McDougall, you mentioned summer camp staff.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So again, we do plan on training all of our summer camp staff and the majority of our seasonal program staff in this program. But again, we have the operating monies already budgeted and allocated. Like I said, we're just moving it around each year to take advantage of these opportunities. So this is not new money.
Counselor?
So the money for the training that will take place in this before the summer camps, which I think is a great idea, but we're trading, I agree with training them, but it's a transient population. Sometimes they stay with us, sometimes they don't. But you still believe that it's beneficial to spend the money to train everybody to make sure we have that quality. That's a yes. Okay. I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Weiss?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. My question, it's not really a question. I've been through High Five before. I think it's an excellent program. And when we're talking about the number of children that you deal with in your area in community services, and of course, we're dealing with accessibility issues, that this has important crossover effects, and it's becoming a standard in the industry. So I think it's important for us to be involved in this. And I think the cost of it on an annual basis, based upon the creating the understanding that we are a high five community, is well worth the money. So I'm in favor of this.
Thank you. Councilor Gillen, did you have your hand up?
I did, but my questions were asked and answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Moves to 11.1, 2025-2026 budget and 10-year capital plan. A presentation from myself and Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel. So I'm thrilled to present the Town of Aurora's 2025-2026 operating budgets and 10-year capital plan. This budget maintains all current service levels and makes strategic investments in key areas that will sustain the very high quality of life that Aurora has become known for. The tax levy increase for 2025 is 3.5% and 2.9% for 2026. For a home assessed at $800,000, this translates to an annual increase of $87.52 in 2025 and $75.05 in 2026. This increase includes a 1% rise in capital reserve contributions, ensuring long-term financial stability for major community projects. The reality, and I know many of my council colleagues know this as well, is that many people in our community continue to feel financially strained, and it was extremely important to keep this tax increase as low as possible. That's why I'm very pleased that we kept the inflationary portion of the tax levy lower than the consumer price index, and we will continue to strive to keep the levy in line or below the level of inflation. This budget ensures that the town of Aurora can continue offering all the exceptional services and programs that are important to so many community members. This includes our world-class recreational programs, town-led special events, snow clearing, maintenance of our parks and trails, bylaw and animal services, and so much more. Importantly, it enables us to continue supporting Central York Fire Services and other important community partners, including the Aurora Public Library, the Aurora Cultural Center, Sport Aurora, and the Aurora Sports Hall of Fame, organizations that all significantly improve the lives of our community members. This budget will also see us move forward on key projects in our 10-year capital plan that will significantly strengthen our community as we continue to grow, projects that truly help build a complete community where everyone can thrive. This includes modernizing town facilities, redeveloping playgrounds, and improving tennis and pickleball courts in several of our parks. We will enhance the Benjamin Pearson Park Boardwalk, upgrade our technology to accommodate online tax and water billing for residents, and conduct traffic calming and pedestrian crossing studies. We will make needed improvements to local infrastructure, including numerous roads, stormwater ponds, sewers, and pumping stations, projects that keep Aurorans healthy and moving, and that also ensures we're climate resilient. And at a time when we really do need to play our part in addressing the housing crisis, we will continue working on initiatives that help get more housing built in our community. By developing tools like the community planning permit that streamlines zoning and approval processes to accommodate our projected growth, while still allowing us to maintain our built and natural heritage. This budget is a result of a tremendous amount of teamwork with staff, elected officials, residents, and businesses all providing input on priorities during our pre-budget consultations. And I do want to give a very special acknowledgement to our Treasurer and Director of Finance, Rachel Wainwright Van Kessel, as well as the entire finance team for their very hard work on this budget. We simply couldn't have done it without them. As you know, presenting this budget is a responsibility that I take very seriously as mayor. And at the same time, it's important to note that all councillors have the opportunity to propose amendments to this budget, which is a critical part of the process. So I look forward to the feedback, and I'm committed to working collaboratively with council to ensure that this budget works in the best interests of all Aurorans, and we can continue to get things done. I will pass the mic to Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So continuing on, we'll get into some more of the details of the budget. First, we'll go through an overview, and then we'll look at the operating budget followed by capital, and then get into some of the information on the reserves and debt management, and then next steps through our budget process. Okay. Here we go. So as you know, our multi-year budget process follows the term of council. Right now, we are in year 3. I'm having issues with the clicker here. So we are in year 3, which is what we are looking now to readopt years 3 and 4. So part of this budget is looking at the budget that was presented last year and noting any of the significant changes. So next slide. When we look at the budget at a glance, we can see that the overall gross expenditures are at 125.9 million for 2025 and rising to 130.1 million in the following year. Can you click? But the tax levy increases here have remained the same as what was presented in the 2024 to 2026 budget last year. Our capital expenditures, we're looking at planning and spending in 65.3 million in 2025, with new capital budget authority requests of 30.9 million. We are not requesting any new or additional debt at this time. Aurora's share of the tax dollar is 38 cents, with most of the tax dollar going towards York Region initiatives, and there's also 18 cents towards the provincial education. Breaking down that 38 cents, most of the amount goes towards town departments, which is 25.3 cents, followed by corporate items, which includes contributions to capital reserves, then Central York Fire, followed by the library, and then the remaining of our community partners. The average household impact, as mentioned earlier by the mayor, for an average house assessed to 800,000, which I know sounds low, but these assessments are from back in 2016. It has been a while. Is about $87.52 on average for this year. And then the quarterly water bill increase is at 19.62 cents. So getting into the operating budget. As you can see, we do have a balanced budget, which is required under the Municipal Act. The largest portion of our costs are salaries and benefits, followed by program costs, and then water and wastewater services, which are purchased from York Region. Most of our budget is paid for using tax levy sourced funds, including supplementary tax and payments in lieu of tax. And then user rates make up the next largest portion of that. And those are user rates paid for water, wastewater, and stormwater services. As we can see here, the operational services department has the largest gross spending on their budget. And however, when we look at the net budget overall, the largest share of our budget actually goes towards Central York Fire Services. The reason being is operational services manages a lot of the storm, water, wastewater services. So much of their costs are paid through the user rates that are collected. This breakdown gives you an idea of the drivers that we have behind the tax levy. In the 2025 budget, most of this is made up from the base amounts, which are generally continuing on with the services that we had before and represent inflationary type increases overall. We do have some growth included in there, and we've also got the fiscal strategy at 1%. In 2026, we do have a portion of the savings that we are expecting to receive from the producer responsibility to waste, which are being transitioned over towards capital reserve contributions for asset management, along with the completion of the LED debt. This chart is one that I've shown you the last couple of years as we've been dealing with significant inflation over the last few years. You can see on that solid line, the inflation is starting to temper a bit, and it's beginning to balance out a little bit. Part of the challenge is we're still seeing some significant inflationary impacts on some of our multi-year operating contracts. And the reason for that is we have contracts that have been in place for 5 years. So these were set in 2019 pricing prior to that rapid inflation that we've seen over the last few years. So we're still seeing some of the impacts of that happening, particularly in the operational services department on some of the roads and streetlight services. This provides an overview of the changes to the budget. So the 24 outlook is the budget that was presented last year for 25 and 26. And then the 25 budget shows you what we're presenting this year. There have been a few changes. You'll notice that one of the bigger increases in there is in operational services, and that's relating to the inflation that I just spoke about. But there have been some savings or other revenue increases in other areas. And we also did experience an increase in our assessment growth, which has helped offsetting some of these pressures that we've had to be able to maintain the tax levy that was communicated last year in last year's budget. Overall, in the change to Outlook, we do have the information categorizing what some of those significant changes are. This information is also provided on a departmental level. And as the departmental presentations come forward next week on Monday, you'll get to hear a bit more about how it's impacting each service area. But this gives you an idea of some of those increases that we're seeing and some of the savings that we're also experiencing. For example, facilities energy savings is resulting in a savings of $195,000 in 2025, which helps offset some of the other pressures in other areas. One of the other key pieces to note on here is that the multi-year budget contingency that was included in last year's budget for 25 of $100,000 has been removed. And that is to help pay for some of the pressures that occurred in this budget. The multi-year contingency still remains for the following year. And the reason is that that's to accommodate any of these unknowns that may come forward as we develop the 2026 budget. The proposed staffing that was included in the budget last year does remain the same. These positions are identical to the ones that were presented in last year's budget. So they do include in 25 the transition to in-house HVAC services in the facilities team, improving the town's success in grants by hiring an additional financial management advisor focused specifically just on grants. Improvements to bylaw in 25 and 26 by including 2 additional officers to help roll out some of the modernization initiatives that are coming forward, a water operator in 25 in the operational services area. In addition to that, in 2026, we have another flex operator to address some of the growth in our parks and road services. And then we also have a project management office coordinator. All the business cases for these are found in your budget binder, and we will get into those more as we talk about departments in the coming week. The proposed rate increases, so this is the user rates for water, wastewater, and stormwater, do remain the same. We have not changed them from what was presented in the budget last year. There was very minimal change to this budget overall. So we have what we promised last year for both rates and for tax levy do both remain unchanged. This slide shows you the overall impact in the average residential water bill. So the increase overall, the $19.62 is the average increase year over year from 24 to 25. As you can see, what the outlook presented was the same as what we're presenting now. So the budget is focusing on the reaffirmation process. So we're going to be focused mostly on a lot of the changes. The information, the way it was presented last year, showing those year over year increases, those are also included in your budget documents as well for your information. The tax and user rate increases remain the same as the outlook. Inflation continues to be a budget pressure, and we're hoping that's going to taper off as inflation settles down over the next few years. And York Region did increase their water rates and wastewater rates by 3.3%. There's reserve contributions included in the budget, including the strategic initiatives of converting the LED debt completion and the producer responsibility for waste savings to the asset management reserves. And we also include assessment growth revenue of 1.6% in 2025 and 1.2% in 26. Moving on to the capital budget. As mentioned earlier, we're looking at spending $65.3 million in 2025, and we've got an additional $30.9 million in new capital budget authority. This would result in capital budget authority total of $213 million, $213.9 million in overall for 2025, but that includes multi-year approvals. As you can see, the plan, when we look at a comparison to the 10-year plan that was presented in the 24 budget versus this year, there are some notable changes. So starting looking out at 2033, you can see that the plan now is more complete. It reflects more of the information that we have from the asset management plan, so is more fulsome plan overall. There's also some additional roads and asset management projects that have been added, particularly into 2025. And it also includes a few deferrals that were not able to be completed in 2024. Asset management and growth make up most of the 10-year capital plan. But even with these additional funds that are being put towards asset management, we're still not able to capture everything that we'd like to be able to do. Part of the constraint of that is the funding in the reserves and the availability to be able to spend that money on projects. Ideally, we would have been able to expand the asset management plan and add another $32 million for roads, $11.8 million for water, wastewater, and $9.5 million for stormwater. These projects will get added in over time as contributions to the asset management reserves increase over time. This slide gives you an overall picture of what our core assets look like. We've got about $2.46 billion worth of assets in Aurora that we do maintain. And our asset management plan is to support maintaining those assets in good repair so they can be used by everyone in the community. The $30.9 million of new capital budget authority that's proposed is largely in the asset management area. And we have also included a number of new capital programs. So the way the budget is presented this year, particularly for asset management, most of the projects now fit within a capital program. We found that they work really well for maintaining that flexibility to deal with some projects being over and under, and flexibility to move money between projects, while at the same time ensuring that we maintain the same scope of the project. We also had about 18.8 million in projects which are currently closed, and we should expect some more projects to be closing in the following year. So this slide gives you a newer picture of what the asset management capital programs look like. You can see some expansion in this area, particularly some of the ones that we've included for parks and public works. We also added in a community partners group, community programs group. And this helps give project managers a bit more flexibility to ensure we can get projects done on time. Getting into reserve and debt management. So when we look at our overall reserves by key reserve grouping, each reserve maintains a positive balance over the full 10-year period. And as you can see, relatively, our reserves stay in a fairly healthy state. However, we do have some projects that are now included in unfunded category. And part of this is the latest development charge study recognizes that some of these projects have a significant benefit to the existing communities, so they cannot be all paid for through growth means. That means we need either another source of funding, whether it be tax levy source reserves or possible grants. So we are going to be seeking opportunities for grants to pay for the town's portion of this, the non-growth portion of this, to support the development of many of these projects. Looking at our debt repayment over the next 10 years, you can see it is peaking in 2025, and then it's going to be declining over the next couple of years after that. There is development charge debt, which includes the Stronach Recreation Complex, which was a 20-year debenture that is expecting to complete in 2025, which is where the development charge debt decreases a little bit. We have the Hallmark Baseball Diamonds, which will complete in 2041. And currently for the Sark Gym, we are on a construction line of credit. And once that project completes, we'll convert that into a long-term debenture. The user fee debt that we have there, which is the teal color line, that relates to the Aurora Sports Dome. That's a 15-year debenture, which will end in 2036. And come 2026, we make our last tax-funded debt payment, which is on the LED debt, light conversion. The fiscal strategy guides how we develop the budget, and it provides a lot of the principles that are followed to ensure that we have a long-term sustainable capital plan, and that we also maintain reasonable tax levy and user rates for the overall community. So these are many of the guiding principles that set the stage for how we move forward as a town and how we develop these multi-year budgets. Our next steps in our process. So right now we have the budget was published on October 29th. So that initiated the 30-day review period under strong mayor powers. During this review period, we have the presentation this evening. Monday next week, we are going to have a presentation from each of the department heads and presenting both our operating capital budget together. I do suggest if anyone has questions on any of those chapters, take the opportunity to go through them, reach out to the department heads and ask those questions in advance, and then be prepared for the meeting on Monday. Then the following Monday, we have another meeting with our community partners. So that includes a fire, library, Sport Hall of Fame, Sport Aurora, Historical Society, and the Cultural Center.
And fire.
Fire. I thought I mentioned fire. So we'll have those presentations on the 18th. And if there's any further items relating to any of the departmental budgets, we can follow up with those afterwards. The clerk's office is also kindly asking if there are any amendments that you have to the council or to the mayor's budget, that they do get submitted to the clerk's office on the 21st. That will give us the opportunity to develop the agenda for November 25th, where we have a special meeting of council to discuss and review and vote on any of those amendments. At that point in time, council can choose if they want to waive the rest of remaining time. Otherwise, after 30 days, if there are no amendments, then the budget is deemed adopted. After that, we can get into the mayor veto period and then potentially into a review of that veto at a council meeting in the future. So that's where we are at today, and look forward to getting into the budget a bit more deeper and more discussion as in the few weeks ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel. Council, can I get a motion to receive for information? Mr. Thompson, second by Councilor Cowell. Any comments or questions at this point? Councilor Gardner?
Thank you very much. I think you said that through Mr. Mayor to Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel, I think you said that we're not looking to take on any more debt at the moment.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So at this point in time, the budget's not proposing any new debt authority. It's not saying that there won't be some in the future. It's just that we haven't got any planned in the 10-year plan at this point in time. In the future, if there's other significant projects that come along, it would have to get evaluated at that time, but there's no plan at this time.
Councilor?
Thank you, but we're talking about the 10-year timeline. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions this time? Councilor Gilliland?
Thank you. I just wanted to get some clarity through Mr. Mayor to Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel. If the public wants to come out and delegate, does that process still remain the same on the next Monday when we present? Is that when they would come to council, and if they had anything that they would like to share about the budget, that is when they would come?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm getting nods from the deputy clerk. So yes, the delegation process would still apply at their budget committee meetings if they wish to come forward.
Okay, Councilor?
Perfect. I just wanted to understand if that had changed or not. One last question through Mr. Mayor, Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel. I understand that we did a survey out to the public about this upcoming budget, asking for feedback from the public on things that they felt that were important for our town to be spending our taxes on. And I was curious as to whether or not there's some sort of a report or data points that you would provide council at a meeting, so at least it's there for public record to see.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's included in the report that's on tonight's agenda. In the actual report itself, there's a discussion of some of the information that we received out of that survey results.
Councilor?
Thank you. I did read the report, but I didn't see specific. I only saw like a handful of highlights, but I'm certain there's probably more in-depth look at some of the feedback. This was just some highlights, no? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
Through you, Ms. Mayor, yes, this is some of the highlights. After we reviewed the feedback that we received and digested it, we put in the highlights in this report.
Councilor?
Thank you. So I guess my question is, would council have access or be presented with the full report of data information that was engaged with Engage Aurora on the budget input?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we'd have to go through it in a little bit of detail. There's some comments in there that can be traced back. We don't want to, it's supposed to be an anonymous survey, so we have to be careful in how we release some of the information. So maybe you and I can connect, Councillor Gilliland, and we can go through some of that together.
Councilor?
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Councilor Gardner, second time.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor to Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel. I think I will ask the question about the rate of inflation that we spoke about today and why we're trying to keep things below the rate of inflation, but we will have to, when we pay for goods and services, have to pay the rate of inflation. So through you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So with the inflationary increases we're seeing them, we are experiencing them over time. So as the contracts come due, and they don't all come due at the same time. But what we're also doing as a town is we're making sure that we look at opportunities to increase any of our non-tax revenues, and then also look at opportunities for savings, such as the energy savings that we see here. Also, with the additional assessment growth that we've received, while growth generally pays for some of those growth activities, it's not always the same scale as how you need to apply it. So it does give us an opportunity to use some of that growth to manage some of the pressures that are included in the budget. So we're able to successfully keep the rate of the tax increase below inflation.
Counselor?
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. And if you wouldn't mind explaining about, so new growth brings in money, and I thought that that money was supposed to was there to support the new growth requirements. So if I understand it correctly, we don't need all of that money to support the new growth? Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Swear, I think that's it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So what happens is when we have new growth come on, there's some services which are very scalable. For example, waste collection, roads maintenance, and things like that. There are other services where you don't have to scale up immediately. So it gives us some flexibility in how we manage the growth overall. And often we get some economies of scale as we're providing the same service to our larger group. We're able to do that on a lower cost per capita basis. So what it does is it provides us that opportunity to offset some of these inflationary pressures that we're seeing today without having to spend all of that money on growth with the additional assessment growth.
Counselor?
Follow up for you. The comment, we don't have to scale up at the moment, doesn't that put the costs forward to the next year?
Swear, I think Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So for example, we have 2 tax administrators which manage about 22,000 tax accounts. As we bring on additional tax accounts, we don't necessarily need another tax administrator as we bring on, say, another 100 accounts. It's a matter of when that scale tips to be able to require those additional services. Often we can scale up and we have capacity to certain levels, but we get some economies of scale in some of the services we deliver as well, because we're able to provide the same service very broadly with existing resources. It all depends on the type of service it is and what type of service we're providing. Like I said, with things like garbage, you add another house, you have to collect garbage for another house. So it's a little bit different depending on the different services that the town provides.
Counselor?
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I'll vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Sure. Okay, we'll move to 14.1. Mr. Gardner, you pulled this one. Do you want to move the recommendation? Someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Thompson, thank you. Seconder. Councillor Gilliland, thank you. Councillor Gardner, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. The question through Mr. Mayor would be to Mr. Ramuno, although Mr. Jean is in attendance. So what exactly is different from this new bylaw to the old bylaw?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, simply, this is just an update of our additional residential units registration bylaw. First one was back in 2012 when the province mandated second suites permitted as right in the zoning bylaw. As you're aware, back Bill 23 a couple of years ago, the provincial legislation mandated 3 additional residential units per lot. So this is really just updating the current bylaw to recognize the additional residential units in town. We've also enhanced the actual registration bylaw to include sections beyond page 7, dealing with inspection and enforcement. If any more detailed questions, I can certainly ask our chief building official, Bill Jean, to address the podium.
Council.
I don't know if this is a more detailed question, but so we allow 3 units on a property, a single residential, something that was a single residential property. But the addition of a separate building or a garden suite, the province hasn't put forward any policy on it. They've suggested municipalities refer to the City of Toronto's bylaws on this. I was looking at the City of Toronto's bylaw, and it's been updated April to April 2024. Garden suites are going to be quite a new thing for Aurora. And I would like, as in Toronto, to have a section on garden suites. Maybe this does require Mr. Jean. Oh, sorry. Through you, Mr. Moore.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, before Bill gets to the podium, I just want to be clear. Bill 23 legislation allows for 3 residential units per resident per lot, including garden suites. So they're permitted as a right, prevail over local official plans and zoning bylaws. Granted, we're going to begin our zoning bylaw review next year. I've got direction from council to consider 4 units as a right. And through that process, there'll be public consultation. We'll certainly look at different zoning parameters, et cetera. But I just want to be clear that provincial legislation was clear that a municipality can impose within their zoning bylaw standards that would restrict the ability for property owners to construct 3 units on their property, including a garden suite, which is an accessory structure.
Council.
Thank you, Mr. Muno, through you, Mr. Mayor. As I don't know if council knows, but Mr. Muno knows, we had a situation with a garden suite that was recently done. And because we didn't have any parameters around it, we used basically the shed parameters. What I'm trying to do is make sure that we, like the City of Toronto, have certain rules around the garden suites. And they talk about landscaping setbacks, minimum separation between residential buildings, height, maximum stories, lot coverage. There's a lot of things that are new with the garden suites, the standalone suites. And I would like to see more, excuse me, more information on that, as the City of Toronto does have in the bylaw, so that when somebody comes forward and wants to do a garden suite, they're very clear on what they can and can't do. And I think that's best placed in the bylaw, or perhaps a separate standalone garden suite bylaw. So I don't know if either of you would like to comment on that. But
Mr. Romero.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, as part of our zoning review, we're going to take a look at a number of things, specifically with respect to increasing our heights for accessory structures to permit 2-story accessory structures for property owners to take advantage of, perhaps, a garage on the ground level and the additional suite on the 2nd story. Currently, our height within our zoning bylaw restricts that ability for accessory structures. So there are a number of standards we have to look at, quite frankly, to be a little more flexible to ensure that we allow the 3rd, and if we go the route of the 4 units as a right. So that's something that we'll certainly take a look at moving forward as part of our zoning bylaw update with respect to accessory residential units in 2020.
Council.
thank you, through Mr. Mayor. You know, I had a resident who had a lot of concerns about what wasn't said in the bylaw and the use of an accessory structure, which is basically a shed, which is not meant to be lived in. And I also know that it took us a while to get the last zoning bylaw in place. So I would like to see some protections and guidelines, especially on the garden suites now, because I imagine that they will begin to be more and more popular in Aurora. That's my comment for the moment.
Councilor Weiss?
Yeah, thank you. And through you, Mayor, I guess my question is to Mr. Ramuno, that this particular report is just simply Bill 23 going from 2 to 3. And it's as simple as that, with the same caveats in place, meaning that we still do not have the right to enter buildings. There's enforcement issues and the rest of it, but it's an updating from 2 to 3. Is that pretty much correct through you,
Mr.
Mayor?
Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Now, carrying on with what Councillor Gartner said about the garden suites. Right now, the zoning and the site plans that are being put forward are they being used in a stable neighborhood manner? What kind of discussions, because many of these will likely be in older neighborhoods, and many of them will have stable neighborhood questions. So what is the process you're using now to approve these plans that come forward for a garden suite? And the second question after that is there a need for a different bylaw for the garden suites, as has been suggested by Councillor Gartner, through you to Mr. Ramuno?
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So currently we use the existing zoning bylaw in whatever zone category an application comes in. It may, the stable neighborhood bylaw may apply. And so we use those standards within that bylaw. But again, moving forward, as I mentioned, we're certainly going to take a look at whether those standards need to be tweaked with respect to permitting a third or perhaps a fourth residential unit, and specifically garden suites, because the legislation was clear, they're permitted as a right. And we're going to have to look at some of our standards. I mentioned the one, for instance, that's come up, is the ability to permit a garden suite to have a first and a second story. Our current bylaw speaks to accessory structures, has a limit of, in most zones, 4.5 meters. It's almost impossible to build a 2-story accessory structure within that current standard. Now, an applicant could certainly come forward with a minor variance request. We haven't had that yet, but again, we probably dealt with less than a handful of garden suites in town. I think we're on our third or fourth one.
Councillor?
So this will be included in the bylaw review that you were talking about earlier. And can you tell me when that's going to happen, through you, Mayor?
Mr. Romano?
Through Mr. Mayor. So we'll begin early 2025. We've just issued our request for proposal. We're actually evaluating those now. So we're looking at commencing that early 2025. And our plan is to have that update complete by the end of the year. Again, we've got direction to review a number of different things as part of that zoning review. One is the accessory residential units. It's the pre-zoning within our corridor and major transit station areas. So there's a number of directions we have to follow through in 2025.
Councillor?
Yeah, thank you. And I guess my last comment is I've heard from many residents, particularly in the older neighborhoods where this applies, that they're very concerned about the stable neighborhood guidelines being included in this new zoning that is coming through. Again, you can imagine some of them are concerned about 2 stories and 4 units on a residential lot, and many of them are vulnerable in Ward 1 and other wards as well. So I just want to bring that comment to you. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Councillor Gardner, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you, and to Mr. Muno and to my council. The legislation from the province was clear. about the number of units, but it wasn't clear on any regulations. And the advice for us as municipalities is to look to Toronto because they've had garden suites for a long time. And they have updated their bylaw as very recently as of April 2024. What we're using right now is the shed bylaw as the basis. We did that for the home you and I discussed a few months ago. So to me, that's not appropriate. And I think it would be fair and respectful to our residents to have something in place pertaining to standalone garden suites. And it's not reinventing the wheel. Toronto has it very clearly, a number of stories. I think they allow 2 stories. I would really appreciate if staff would look at that. I could send it to them. It wasn't easy to find. But it is comprehensive, and some of it would not refer to Aurora at all. But I'm thinking of the residents that might be affected between now and the time we finally get the bylaw done. It's not going to happen overnight. It maybe could take a year or more. So I'm looking out for those residents that may have their quality of life affected inappropriately, and it would be very easy to have some basic parameters as the City of Toronto has. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 11.2 Water Meter Replacement Program. Councillor Kim, you pulled this one. Did you want to move the recommendation? Thank you. Seconder. Councillor Reese. Go ahead, Councillor Kim.
I'm very pleased with respect to how the water meter replacement transition has occurred over the many years. I think it started in 2015 or 16. Just some observations and subsequent questions to staff. In 2021, we had a similar report when we had our last contract with WAMCO. And the figure was 1.533 million. And the current ask is 1.9 over 5 years. And in 2021, in April, there was no date set, but it's specified 8,500 meters. So I'm just trying to compare apples to apples to see what the increased cost to us, or perhaps a lower cost, but I suspect that's not the case. So I just want to know, in this report, it shows that it specifies that each meter is costing $396 based on 8,500 meters in 2021 and 1.533 million. I'm sure there's other costs built in. It's only $180 per meter. So I'm just wondering, before I ask the other questions, if staff can speak to that.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, the cost of the meters has increased, but it also depends on the type of meters that we're replacing. The residential ones are the ones that's quoted in the report, and the increase on those. But the larger meters do cost more, and sometimes we don't manage to replace as many meters, but we've done more commercial meters, which are more costly meters to replace.
Councillor.
Thank you. And for you, Mr. Mayor, I've heard, fewer complaints from residents. So for me, that's an indication to me that this is working. We talked about in previous reports, and when WAMCO first came on board with us, that staff would have a dashboard. Clients or residents can have a dashboard to see what their usage is and whether there's any leakage. So for me, it's anecdotal evidence in terms of my lack of hearing from residents of my ward. But can you through Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Van Wainwright. What's the experience with staff in terms of complaints from residents and their satisfaction levels?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So there's a couple of things going on there. We still do get some complaints from residents when they have high water bills. We are working towards implementing the automated meter read technology. We've just reached an agreement with York Region for the use of their water towers, and the engineering drawings for those are complete. So we should be able to get the antennas up soon. And we're looking to have that rolled out in 2025. That's in a separate project. The biggest difference is particularly for this project individually is the old meters don't have the same precision on how they measure the water. The new meters that we're replacing, particularly in the households, they go down to more decimal places, whereas rather than just looking for each individual cubic meter. So once the automated read technology is available and we have the hourly reads, it will provide better information to users. And once we do have that going, and it has taken some time, the pandemic really did delay this project. And we've also been dealing with some delays on the ladders on the water tower is a bit of an issue right now. So once we get past all that and we get this system in place, we're going to make sure that we have a good communications campaign out to people so that they know how they can set up their own alerts and monitor their own water usage, and it should make things better for everyone in the world.
Councilor.
Thank you. And my next question, Mr. Mayor, is in 2021, we had converted roughly 55% of water meters. Can you update us now in terms of what that transition level is now? Are we up to 75, 80%?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have the percentage in front of me, but we do have about 8,000 meters left to go. And then we'll have 100% conversion.
Councilor.
Thank you. And lastly, one of the reasons why we chose WAMCO is because of their platform, the infrastructure to allow us to be able to get the water meter remotely without having to, pay us a separate vendor, $65,000, going out there and reading the meters manually. And I think largely this has been successful. But do we have service levels? Because right now, this company, because this is a single source contract, and I understand the reasons for that. But usually when companies have their own particular platform infrastructure, they do have a certain moat around them that protects them from competitors, because certainly if we were to transition to another competitor or vendor, it would be a huge task for us to do so. But that said, they're still delivering great service from what I understand. But do we have service levels in place in terms of at what point will the town say, okay, you know what, service levels are not being met. We have to, perhaps consider alternatives. But there's certainly a cost to moving at that point. So I guess the long and short of it is, do we have service levels in place where we may have to think of that in the future?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So for the implementation or the conversion of the meters, we do require certain evidence and like photos and things from the provider to make sure that if they're doing additional work, because sometimes they will go to a home and there might be some obstructions in being able to get to the meter. So we do want to make sure that if that is the case and we have to bill for that extra piece, that we have photos to prove that this is something that's happened. For the purpose of dealing with the automated read technology, if we were putting that in place, if we switch meters, we'd need two different systems because they're proprietary systems. So we can't have the WAMCO's proprietary system read a Neptune meter. So part of why we're continuing on with WAMCO is we want to be able to provide this additional service and that monitoring on the individual's level, but also by the town with the hourly reads. And to do that, we need to stay consistent across all of our meters across the town.
Councilor.
That's great. No, thank you.
You, Councilor Gallo.
Thank you. And just to follow up on that, I looked back at previous reports, and this actually started in 2014 for $289,000 for a single source for 1,000 meters, and that the director had authorization. At the time, it was IES. It converted to finance in 2021 or 2022, I believe, for an additional 2 years. And in 2019, we spent another $750,000 without taxes for a 5-year, and then the director had authority for an additional 3 years of 1-year terms. And then in 2021, yep, we spent another 1.533 million. And that was for a one-time. And then in 2022, we spent 611,000 for a 5-year term for the licensing and maintenance costs for the automated water meter reading. So I'm unclear, and perhaps between now and council, if we could get a summary of exactly what we've spent to WAMCO for these meters, because some of them, like the first one, 289,000, was for a 2-year term. And then the one that doesn't make a lot of sense to me is the 2019, that it says a 5-year term, which would bring us up to today. And then it had approval for another 3 years, that for another 3-year, one-year terms that council gave authority for. So if between now and council, if we could get a summary of all of that, exactly what this has cost us, and then we add in the 1.9 million on tonight's agenda. As I see it, we're somewhere around $5.5 million. But I could be wrong on that because it wasn't clear how many terms and how much per year. And then in 2022, we had the maintenance and support costs. And my question is that an ongoing thing that every so often we pay this in perpetuity to WAMCO to, it says here that a non-standard procurement of 611,000 for a 5-year term be awarded to WAMCO for the annual licensing and maintenance cost to support the automated water meter reading technology capital project number, whatever. Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, we can put together a summary of that information. There is a few things with WAMCO. There is the automated read technology, there's the replacement meters, and then there's also the new meters contract that we have as well in operational services. So we'll put that all together in one summary for you.
Okay, that'll be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, just to follow on Councillor Gallo's comments, it is true, looking back over the history of over the years, that 2019 report you referenced really was us also behind the meters on behalf of the new homes being built, and we were to receive those monies back in terms of the recoveries. So if we can include that to make sure that we did recover that. But also just to give, I guess, if possible, a little bit of a breakdown historically, what the cost has been on a per meter basis and how that has risen since 2014 to 2024 now.
Ms. Mayor, I guess.
Thanks.
I see you nodding your head, yes. Thank you. Councillor? That's it?
Yep.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Councillor Kemp, can you go to this one quick, the next one, or you think we can get it done in 2 minutes? Sure. Okay, we'll do one more and then we'll take our break. Tax sale process 11.3. Councillor Kim, you want to move the recommendation? Thank you. Seconder. Councilor Weiss, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the report from the finance team. I guess overall, my comment would be, and my question is, it's unfortunate that it takes 4 years to recoup tax in arrears, and in the residential section, it's in excess of 2 million. I'm sure staff has, reviewed this, and so my question to Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel, through Mr. Mayor, is was it or is it possible to shorten that time frame to even 3 years? Because 4 years seems like a long time to have to wait to collect. And I do understand that with certain families, there could be some tragedy or whatever. And so we do need to be sensitive in certain cases. But in general, is there a possible way to reduce that 4 years?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So this report outlines the timelines in accordance with the Municipal Act. So even before we get to the stage where we start registering properties for tax sale, we still do activities to recover funds. We do try to collect funds, and we have some success in some of the letters that we do send out. Part of it is educating the residents who are behind on their taxes of what the situation is and what the tax sale process is before we even get into that stage, to make sure that they're aware. And this report, the intent is to make sure that council and the public is aware of what the process is, so that we can, try and avoid this situation. What we are looking for is for people to pay off their taxes, possibly reach out to their bank. They will provide better interest rates than what the town does. And hopefully we can move forward from that way. Generally, most properties do not actually end up in a tax sale. They do get paid off.
Councilor.
Great, thank you. So it's part of the Municipal Act and it's beyond our process to change, but thank you for the education.
Any other comments, questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Take our health break, everyone. Hey, 11.4, Community Partner Reserve Management Policy. Councillor Weiss, you pulled this one. Did you want to move the recommendation? Thank you, seconder. Councillor Kemp, thank you. Councillor Weiss, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I brought this up last term. I'm looking at some of the community partners, so I'm glad and thankful for the department for looking into it and bringing it back to the FAC before bringing it here. I just have a couple of questions on it that I'm sure can be answered quickly through you, Mr. Mayor, to our treasurer. And it has to do with the definitions of each of the reserves. We have the statutory and jurisdictional versus the discretionary. And how do you determine the difference between those two or amongst them?
Ms. Ware Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So statutory reserves typically are ones that have legislation that are backed behind them, whereas discretionary do not. The reserves that we look for in our community partners are generally a bit more discretionary type reserves unless they've got a specific grant or something that they've received from an agency behind them. And all the types of reserves are defined within the policy. So we've defined a number of them, including the operating, stabilizing, contingency reserves, and the capital reserves as well.
So,
Councillor.
So the oversight of this is going to be with your department and take a look at the calculations and do all the things that are required through you, Mayor.
Ms. Maria Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes. So the review of this will be by the finance department. In those organizations that are larger and do have audited statements, we'll review those. In the organizations that are the smaller ones that do not require audited statements, we may go into further detail and we'll ask questions where appropriate to ensure that the reserve transfers are done in an appropriate manner.
Councillor.
And have you done any simulations or runs on this with some of the existing partners to see whether any of them will have difficulty or are having difficulties with meeting the reserve fund requirements?
Ms. Maria Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we did reach out to all the community partners to get their feedback. We got feedback from most of them. So originally we did have a shorter time period for the reserve requirements, but we decided to align more with that of the Ontario Trillium Fund, which is the 12 months. And they agreed that balance would work more for what their needs are.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Thanks. I just looked at it, and also this is going to be put in place, you think, in 2026? So you're not planning on having it for the 2025 budget for you?
Ms. Maria Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, once the policy is approved, and we will actually put it into application for 25. What we will do is we will apply the policy at the time the funds are being released to our community partners. So we will look at their statements because their statements usually follow on a little bit later. So then that way we can review their statements, ask any questions we need to prior to releasing their funds for the fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gallo.
Thank you. My only question is about the $250,000 threshold. Just where that number came from, if it's standard amongst something.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So again, we were looking at the Ontario Trillium Fund as one of the markers to what would be reasonable. They actually do require it for over 250,000, and it's a number of other granting agencies do as well. We didn't want to go below that amount because audited statements, the cost to prepare them, it can be quite expensive. So unless it's otherwise required by legislation, we decided to stay with that amount that other agencies are looking at.
Councillor.
Do we know how many of our community partners would fit within that category? Offhand, through you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Maria Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So for out of our community partners, the cultural center would fit within this group. The other ones would not. The library is excluded from this policy because they do operate differently.
Councillor.
So it's only the cultural center. Okay. I just, anytime it comes to obviously public funding, we want to be able to put in processes in place to be able to check and recheck that funds are spent appropriately. If we're confident that regular financial statements are sufficient, I know the extent to which audited financial statements can go. In the condominium world, they're really not that expensive, $6,000. But perhaps it's different in other areas. My preference is that number is lowered to capture more of the community groups because we're funding them. But I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you. Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. I had similar questions, that of Councillor Weiss and Gallo, but they were answered. But my follow-up to that would be through Mr. Mayor to Ms. Waite-Brown Castle. Have other municipalities also adopted similar policies such as this that we could also maybe have an example of? Sounds like we're, taking an example from the Ontario Trillium Foundation. I'm just curious as to what other municipalities are doing, because I too felt that $250,000 is rather high. And especially if we are going to be shedding some accountability to the way funds are being spent and how we want to see that spent, I too felt that $250,000 is high. So do you have examples of other municipalities to share?
Ms. Mayor Fincas.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So in the research we did, we were not able to find a similar type of policy in place with any of the other municipalities. We did reach out to the ones in York Region, and we did look outside of York Region as well. The other thing is when you have statement or organizations that operate at under 250,000, there typically is not that many transactions to review. So an internal review by staff is not too onerous. Also, they will often get an accounting firm to prepare statements for them, but they will not provide an audit opinion. To get that audit opinion is where it can be much more costly. So they do often get that piece done, but without the audit opinion, which is the requirement for audited financial statements.
Councillor.
Thank you. So essentially, this is going to be the first of its kind that we know of in York Region and beyond. So, certainly I would want to get it right. And I do have some more questions about it. The one question I did ask, and it was offline, but I don't think you answered it. And maybe it's something similar to what Councillor Weiss was asking. But you use language that it was specific to program specific reserves. And I thought that was a little too subjective. Could you just kind of shed some light on what that means? Because I feel like it could kind of mean however you want it to mean in that instance or circumstance. And it leaves a door open, I think, to perhaps utilizing these reserves to be exempt on the operating that may not necessarily be fair, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at.
Mayor Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So an example of a program-specific reserve would be such as the Kaleidoscope program that Aurora Cultural Center had. They had funds that was dedicated specifically to providing that individual program, and there were some delays in rolling that out. So those would not be factored in. There'd also be, if there's a specific grant they receive for providing a certain program, then that would be counted only towards that program. Again, we would ask the questions and make sure that any changes to reserve balances are fully understood by the team. And we will have a mechanism for reporting back to Finance Advisory Committee on if we're making adjustments or the reasoning why we do or why we do not as we roll this out.
Councillor.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm just throwing it out there. What is to stop a community partner from having a surplus and deciding to spend an extra overage before they come to council because they want to make sure that they meet the threshold or whatever you want it to be, for the sake of being able to qualify for asking for more funds if there's a sufficient amount of operating already in the budget. What's to stop an organization from arbitrarily just utilizing some of the funds maybe on things that may not be a top priority? How do we of council be able to understand and know that we're handing out additional funds to priorities that are really necessary? I guess what I'm trying to suggest is that we want to make sure that they're spending their money accordingly in a way that is of high need, because they are coming to us to ask for assistance. How do we manage that?
Squire Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we'll look for shifts between reserves and other surpluses. Also, the review of the financial statements may indicate some anomalous transactions. We'll also be looking at some of their detailed budget reviews as well. And one of the key tricks to that is actually looking for higher transactions in the later part of the year. So it's something that auditors commonly look for is last minute transactions that are being put through at the end of a fiscal year. And part of that is making sure that they're also delivering upon the services that they actually agreed to deliver. So that's part of the review as well. If we know that they just said they were going to deliver a specific program and it didn't happen, we would expect to see those savings from not having that program delivered.
Counselor.
Thank you. And do we also look to mission statements or their strategic plans to understand fully what it is they're trying to achieve? And I'm asking these questions. We've been down this road before with community partners where we've been on somewhat of a divide of where we felt some of the funding would or could or should have been spent. And, it's just really about accountability, really.
Squire Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we will also be working with our partners across the organization. So with Ms. McDougall's team, they have a better understanding of what should be delivered to make sure those programs do get delivered. And the other piece is once every term, we do a review with Finance Advisory Committee. So that's where our Finance Advisory Committee gets into the details of the amounts that the community partners have spent over the past few years as well. So there is that reporting accountability that will happen on a regular basis once a term with Finance Advisory Committee, and then again once a year for us to be able to release their funding. And we're going to have to make sure that they do what they say they're going to do. And if they didn't do it, we want to make sure that we understand where those funds are.
Counselor.
Okay, I'm going to have some more questions probably for you offline and just to go a little bit more depth on this. And until then, I'll wait until council to be favorable about what's being presented. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Councilor Weiss, second time.
Yes, thank you. And I just want to add that when you look at the CRA and they talk about their charitable organizations, it is $250,000 also in revenue. So it's we can't throw OLT under the bus necessarily. It's widespread, but they also do say in their best practices that if any charitable organization has a request for audited statements from any of their stakeholders and those who donate to them, then they ought to work for them. So I just leave that out there. I just wanted to let you know that it's not just the OLT.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Gallo.
Thank you. Just quickly so that I'm clear on the reserve fund balances. If I understood correctly, we only capture those that are specific to the operations and that they should have a maximum of 12 months worth. So if they have specific reserves for specific programming, we don't capture those. Through you too.
Ms. Van Kessel.
Through Ms. Mary, yes, that's correct. And if there's any reserves that would be related to asset management, if they do have capital assets, then those would be excluded as well.
Council.
And we've communicated this policy with our community groups. And did anyone raise any flags or any issues? For you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we did raise it with all the community groups. Originally, we had maximum 6 months. They did raise an issue with that. That's why we took their advice. And with the additional research, we decided to move to a maximum of 12 months. The Historical Society did ask for more time and they did have some concerns, but I had some communication with their chair and they were satisfied with the response. They were concerned if they had the surplus, but I also mentioned about the asset management obligations they would have owning Hillary House.
Counselor?
So are we mandating them to have a minimum operation reserve for 12 months of operations, or we're just saying that communicate it and that's the maximum that you can have in that reserve?
Mr. Mayor, Venkis?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're saying it's a maximum of 12 months for getting the funds from the town. The recommendation is they should be maintaining usually around a minimum of 6 months. That is required for some granting agencies because they want to make sure that the organization is a going concern so that they're actually going to be able to use the funds and continue and complete the programs.
Okay. Well, anyone with at least employees should have a maximum, minimum maybe, of 12 months.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I'll vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 14.2, draft plan of subdivision. Councilor Gardner, you pulled this. Did you want to move the recommendation? Thank you. Seconder. Councilor Thompson, thank you. Go ahead, Councilor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I apologize to the gentleman in the audience who's representing Charlieville. If I'd known, I would have pulled it forward earlier. Sorry to keep you waiting. This has been going on, you know, what we have here in the report, but this has been going on since 2014. So I don't object to an extension, but through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ramuno, it says to ensure that the development can proceed in finalizing any technical review. Could you elaborate on that?
Mr. Ramuno?
Certainly through you, Mr. Mayor. So the official plan, zoning bylaw, and draft plan of subdivision were approved by the OLT back in December of 2021. So staff at that time imposed a condition that's identified in the Planning Act where municipality may include a 3-year essentially sunset clause for the draft plan of subdivision. And then and the requirement there is if the conditions in the plan of subdivision aren't registered within 3 years, you're allowed to extend it. The reason for that clause is really to revisit any applications that have just been sitting there idly and aren't moving forward. As we all know, in this instance, there's significant amount of work that's happened since, as Councilor Gardner mentioned, in 2014, removing the old building, but since 2021, earthworks and detailed design work with Conservation Authority and town staff. So we're at a point here where we're going to bring forward the site plan, which is the final document for approval either in December or January. And I think the applicant's in the position in the new year to start underground site servicing work towards home construction later on in 2025.
Councilor?
Thank you, Mr. Muno. That's a good summary of the report and what's been happening. But what would be included in technical review matters?
Mr. Ramuno?
To you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe we've attached the, just take a look at the approved conditions of approval. Again, with respect to the plan of subdivision, that's the first plan that needs to be registered within that 3-year time frame. But moving forward, just pull up the conditions.
I'm sorry, did I miss them? Are they on our report? One of the
Yes,
attachments?
yes.
Which one? Thank you.
Schedule A. And again, a lot of these are very typical finalizing draft plan of subdivision. It's the execution of the development agreement, some of the environmental work that is required to be submitted to the Conservation Authority. I think that has all been, for the most part, submitted, but, hasn't been yet finalized or signed off on in order for the plan to be registered. But again, they are well on their way. They've got all their, earthworks permits from the authority, and we're really just down to the final strokes for the town and the Conservation Authority to sign off on conditions for the plan of subdivision to be registered. Again, the plan of subdivision is really just creating the one large block. The next step is the site plan agreement that deals with the actual servicing works and home construction.
Counselor.
Thank you. I have particular interest in this property because it was a brownfield, let's say, very polluted because of the tannery operations. So there's nothing that we're waiting on to that Charlieville has to fulfill with respect to environmental considerations.
Mr. Ramu.
To you, Mr. Mayor. No, my understanding is all the site has been remediated. They're just doing the final earthworks, the cut and fill. And then at that point, it's towards the underground servicing pipes and roads.
Thank you very
Counselor?
much. Sorry to keep you waiting.
Any other comments or questions? Call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. New business. Councilor Weiss.
Thank you. The delegate brought forward a discussion about the colors, and he said there's only 2 colors left for the town square. Can I get I was under the impression there were a number of colors that were available in the town square. So could we get some clarity on that through you to maybe Ms. McDougall? Just an error.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that opportunity. They are and will be programmed and have the options of multicolors. We have learned as we've initiated that we've been limited initially. We're working towards the list to add colors to it. For the individual, we had an option of blue and white. It would revert back and forth. I guess you wanted solid blue. We don't have a solid blue option programmed right now. We're working on getting those individual colors programmed, but that is coming.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. I've had a couple of ratepayers associations with a number of questions around the trails. And when I asked about trails and where those type of questions should go, the Trails Master Plan has been completed. But are trails now, or can trails or questions about trails be pushed through to active transportation and traffic safety? Where should those inquiries and interests lie? So through you, I'm not sure where that goes. This somewhere.
Ms. Steenkamp.
There it is.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly any inquiries around trails can come through operations.
Okay, thank you. The other new business item, last time we had a conversation about ASE, and Mr. Ramuno said that it might take a little while to get this done. We had the community safety zones done, and now the ASEs are going to come into the community or into those community safety zones. And you suggested that it might take a little bit of while to get that set up. And I assume it's not just a budget item, because I've inquired about how the processing goes for tickets and the collections, et cetera. And I found that there's a joint processing center that is in operation right now. So I'm wondering through you to Mr. Ramuno if he's aware of the joint processing centers and the fact that the town could join with someone and participate with them rather than make our own administrative processing center. So through you, through
Mr. Serio.
Mr. Serio.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we are aware that there's joint processing centers. There's a couple municipalities that have been
doing them, including the region, from what I understand. We're still assessing all our options, and then we're going to figure out what's best for the town.
Okay.
Counselor?
good. Thank you. And the last is just a new business. We've had a tragedy just a few days ago in Ward 1. And of course, we're all waiting for the investigation of the shooting and the incident that happened there. But there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of difficult discussions that I've seen on social media. It's almost anti-social media. And I would just like to make the comment that this young person was a son. He was probably a grandson. He was a neighbor. He had friends that are missing him, and it's a tragedy. And I would just like to make a comment that all of our residents should be cautious about some of the hateful rhetoric that I've heard, some of the racist comments. And I just had to bring it up at this council because it's something that has to stop. I don't know how we stop it, but if it's an appeal from us, I think it ought to happen. So that's my only comment about that one. So I hope that our residents can be a little more sensitive to individuals in this community. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilor Garner, your business?
First of all, thank you, Councillor Weiss, for mentioning that. I didn't realize that was happening. To Miss Wainwright about the lights, the cost of the lights. Do we have any idea what that is going to cost? I'm sorry, through you, do I have to do it through you, Mr. Mayor? To Miss McDougall?
With the cost
About
of which lights?
adding colors?
No, this is just programming, Councillor. The lights are already there.
Okay.
It's just a matter of just getting the programming. Yeah.
Good. So I think this is to, I'm not sure, the delegate that came forward. Well, her name was Wendy. James. Oh, you get it, Mr. Muno. I mean, her frustration was so obvious and overwhelming, and none of our residents should have to go through that. Could you please look into it and get this settled? It seems to me that the line was repainted incorrectly.
Mr. Romano?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor, I've got an answer, and we'll follow up with the residents. So yes, when Timpson was repaved this past summer, the center line was put in its original place, which was offset. Our staff are aware of it, and our contractor will be out over the next week or two to make the adjustment.
Councilor?
Done.
Thank you. And if you wouldn't mind thinking about what could be done in the future so that person does not have to come out on a Tuesday night. I mean, if you could please, she's kept careful records. If you could see what has gone wrong in our communications chain, and if anyone bears responsibility, that they understand how it needs to be handled. And you will be in touch. Could someone be in touch with her tomorrow?
I see Mr. Romano nodding his head yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Reno.
New business?
Following up on the delegates or the community presentation, request for the proclamation. Is that something that you're currently looking into, since it falls into the mayor's office?
Proclamation, it falls into the clerk's office, not the mayor's office. Okay. Thank you. Councilor. We just sign off on it. Madam Deputy Clerk.
Certainly, through Mr. Mayor, we can definitely review it and make sure that it's accurate. We do get a sample proclamation from the applicant at the time of the application, but we will definitely review it and ensure its accuracy.
Anything else?
Nothing to require of council?
No. Okay. Councilor Gallo, new business? Go ahead. Oh, just move back. There you go.
Thank you. Just to acknowledge and to thank Councillor Weiss for mentioning the incident and then 17-year-old, I couldn't agree more. While there's nobody around that wants any harm to any police officers or the public. But if that 17-year-old did do something wrong, I always look at it as a failure of our community, that they're put in that kind of position to do something so grave. And we can't ignore that because it's ignoring the problem. And so thank you, Councillor Weiss, for bringing that up, and I share your views. I just wanted to know whether or not there is an update on we spoke earlier about the beautiful fountain at Queen's Diamond Jubilee Park. And while we're obviously putting it to rest, but I was hoping we could hit the ground running in the spring. Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Steenkamp?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We are certainly working with a contractor to remediate the issue and have it functional in the spring.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kim, new business? Councillor Gillen, new business? No. Public service announcements? Councillor Gillen? No. Councillor Kim? Councillor Gallo? Councillor Thompson? Councillor Gardner?
My granddaughter told me it was Diwali. She corrected my pronunciation. So they're learning about this at school, about the different religions and the different celebrations, and I think that's great. So for any members of our community who are participating, I think it's a little bit like Hanukkah. It's a celebration of light and good triumphing. How do I say that, Mr. Mayor? Triumphing. That's not right. Anyway, good over evil. So it's an important message again to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Weiss, public service announcement?
The Kettle Drive is on its way. So if I know some of the councillors go and volunteer their time, and other people in the community, so you can sign up with Northridge right now for your shifts that you would like through December. The other thing is that I was at the Legion event and I met the Harrisons, and it was very important that the work they do with the cards that are put together and sent overseas to our military. And so they're once again offering their services for that. They like to break through the 9,000 that they had last year. So I'm just appealing to people who are interested in helping send a Christmas card to our armed forces that are overseas, that they get in touch with the Harrisons to do that. And then the last thing is I just found out this evening that our town park is now getting started on their all-weather surface, and hopefully that may be done by Christmas time for a Christmas gift for all those people who go to town park. So thank you very much, Mrs. Steenkamp, for all the work and staying diligent on that.
Thank you. I did want to, I have a few of them, but I did want to, and I should have maybe touched on this during when we talked about the budget, but the 2024 budget has won a Distinguished Budget Presentation Award from the Government Finance Officers Association, which recognizes municipalities from across North America that meet the highest budgeting and financial reporting standards. And if you recall, this is the second year in a row that we've won this award, and a huge amount of credit goes to town staff, in particular our finance team. Our hard work ensured budget 2024 was an incredibly strong policy document and financial plan, and presented in a way that clearly, effectively communicated our budget priorities with community members. So congratulations and great job as always. Council and residents, now is the time if you want to join a board or committee for the 2025-2026 term and help shape Aurora's future, from Parks and Rec Advisory Committee to our Accessibility Advisory Committee and Community Recognition Review Advisory Committee. There is a place for everyone. Application deadlines have been extended until Monday, November 11th. And for more details, you can visit aurora.ca/committees. Winter parking restrictions come into effect on November 15. Please avoid overnight street parking as well as on-street parking when it is snowing. These restrictions are in effect to help our snowplows keep our streets clean and safe for pedestrians and vehicles. And to learn more, visit aurora.ca/parking. Also, if you do get a parking ticket, you can actually exchange them for toys. Our annual bylaw services is teaming up with York Regional Police for the Toys for Tickets campaign. So instead of paying your parking fine, donate a new unwrapped toy or non-perishable food item of equal or greater value. And this runs from November 20th to December 13th. And you can get more details by visiting aurora.ca/toys for tickets. We do have a few things coming up that, because we are in November, Aurora's Deck the Halls tour, decorate your home or business for the community. Enjoy during the drive-by experience full of lights and magic from December 9th to 23. You need to register by Friday, November 15th. And the details are at aurora.ca/deck the halls, as well as our Santa Under the Stars parade is November 23rd from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. As always, it's a great time. Floats, toe-tapping marching bands, and a few surprise guests, including the Jolly Man in red himself, Santa. And for more details, you can visit aurora.ca/Santa Parade. And of course, this Sunday, November 10th at 10:20 a.m., the Royal Canadian Legion will be leading the annual Remembrance Day Parade, departing from G.W. Williams Secondary School and continuing down Yonge Street to the Aurora Cenotaph. And the service will be taking place there. And then on Monday, November 11th, the Remembrance Day ceremony will take place at the Cenotaph at 10:45 a.m. I hope to see Aurorans out for that. And for more information, visit the Aurora Legion website at auroralegion.ca. Motion to adjourn. Councilor Reese, Councilor Thompson, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.